Hello everyone and welcome to another incredible and inspiring episode of U Journeys, and I'm your host Palesa Ramafola, and today I'm joined by a remarkable UJ alumnus whose journey from our lecture rooms all the way to the top of the South African property sector is nothing short of inspiring. He is currently the CEO of Growthpoint Properties and was recently promoted to become the Group CEO of Growthpoint Properties here in South Africa. And by the way, that's actually one of the biggest property companies here in RSA, right? And allow me to introduce to you Estienne. Welcome.
Thanks, Palesa. Thanks for the opportunity. Really looking forward to the discussion.
Oh man, we're so excited and we're so humbled that you could make time out of your busy schedule to come and impart all that exciting wisdom and knowledge and everything just about you, because you're so multifaceted, and we're going to get into that in a little bit.
Well, it's the least I could do. I mean, given the value I have had and the amount of time I've spent here on the campus, the least I can do is to come have a chat. And I'm a very patriotic UJ alumni, and as such, it's any opportunity to come to the university is a wonderful one.
Wonderful. And I think, on that note, our congratulations are in order. Congratulations on, your recent appointment. The journey continues,
Absolutely.
You're soon going to be the group CEO. I'm sure you are counting down the minutes, the seconds, and the hours for this year to just go behind us, and we celebrate with you here at the university. We travel and we go on these journeys alongside our alumni, and this is a win not just for you but for us too. And so congratulations.
Thank you very much. It's obviously a great honor for me, and I've been involved with Growthpoint for many years, since literally 2002, and to get the opportunity to have an impact on the business is a real privilege. And as you pointed out, Growthpoint's the largest real estate company in the country, and we're increasingly playing internationally in the markets there. And the idea is to promote not just the company but the industry and our country.
That is so exciting. I just want to park it there for a bit and just on the professional journey, just sort of shift to our academic side. And just as you spoke so, proudly about being a UJ alumni, if you can just throw us back into what your journey was like when you were a student here at the great University of Johannesburg.
Yeah, so it's quite an interesting story. I went to school in a small little school in the south coast of Natal, which is obviously a predominantly English area. I was Afrikaans speaking at the time, so I went to quite a small high school. And then the year after that, I was an exchange student with Rotary in Australia, just north of Brisbane for a year. So I had kind of a year of really learning a little bit more about myself, learning a bit more about our country, because you can imagine in 87, we're sort of South Africa moving into a new dispensation, and I'd grown up actually reasonably protected from all of this. When a lot of my friends were going to military service, I then had this opportunity to go overseas.
Wow.
And it was a wonderful learning experience, and very sort of personally defining, because I got to stand on my own 2 feet, get a bit of idea of what life's really about, and also learn quite a bit of our own country, because, from my perspective, I didn't really have all the insights.
Yeah.
And then when I came back, I was literally here for a weekend and then signed up at the university.
Wow.
And I was signed up for a chartered accountant's qualification. But having spent that year, and I sort of defined myself more as a salesman and a marketer. So I wanted to do that, and unfortunately at that point UJ didn't offer that as one of the study directions. And after a chat to some of the folks there in career guidance department, the then Prof. Zach Null said, no, well, maybe give this HR kind of section a bit of a run. So I then started with my BCom in industrial psychology. But through the journey there, I amended that quite a bit. And by the end of the degree, I was doing business, obviously industrial psychology as a major, but business administration or management. And I added in 2 interesting little subjects, which was investment management and taxation, which was what the chartered accountants were doing. And I must admit, those 2 subjects really changed my thinking quite a bit on my interests. And I then was forced to go and go and work for a while because I had a bursary with the power utility Eskom. But they did allow me, they didn't provide me with a bursary, but they allowed me at that time to come back to the university and do that marketing honours that I was looking to do. So that was the first round at UJ. I started in 88 and finished in 91. And then I worked for Eskom down in Durban for a while, up until, let's say, towards the end of 95. And then I joined Investec Bank. And then through that work, I then came back to the university. At that stage, there was a bridging certificate for taking students that had done accounts and finance many years ago, bringing them up to speed, or students from other universities bringing them up to speed. And then if you pass this bridging certificate in the the theory of accounting, you could then do the CTA course, which was the honours, right? Accounting honours, which is like boot camp. So my personality's never really recovered from that, but I managed to sneak through. It was real carnage in that course in terms of the numbers that actually ultimately passed. But it certainly set me up for my career in the then Investec, which was obviously a banking environment. And I quite soon after that moved into the real estate industry.
That is so interesting. And I'll tell you what. So I'm a marketer myself, but another interesting thing we both have in common, I'm also a Rotarian. And I was also an exchange student. And I know exactly what you mean when you say it really just shaped up your life. So I actually went to Germany on mine. And so I was like, wait, another fellow Rotarian with a very multifaceted background? Because I'm just thinking, you went the accountancy route, but there was a bit of industrial psychology, some marketing. And, one would think, where are you going with all of these subjects, with all of these modules and these very diverse qualifications? But I'm also just thinking it definitely set you up for people management and just dealing with people and interacting with people. And I'm just thinking on a greater scale, how did, this variety of qualifications, how did they set you up as a leader, especially dealing with people?
Yeah, so as you pointed out, it is a journey, and the academic background is really just background in a funny kind of way, but it gave me a very broad understanding of business. So it was sort of a MBA by stealth, if you'd like, because I dealt with all the different components in business. And my first job at Eskom, I actually ended up, albeit that I was in the marketing division, I ended up being a business analyst. So somebody that actually is more focused on IT matters, looking at processes. And it gave me really a nice broad perspective. And in 2007, we actually did a management buy-in of the Growthpoint management into Growthpoint. And at that point, we literally had to set up everything from scratch. So we didn't have an HR. We had to put in HR, IT, all those kind of things. And wonderful experience. And ultimately, you put your finger on it, everything pivots around people. And albeit that real estate is, we define it through the buildings and the shopping centers and the logistics facilities. But ultimately, those assets are merely assets, and they come to life through the actions and what people do in that context. And the reality is, if you have these different kind of perspectives and you can understand what the people should be doing, then it does help to guide them in the direction that they need to be in terms of meeting the objectives that we need to meet.
So you sort of knew what was going on everywhere, because by the way, I studied that. I may not be there, but I studied that. That's wonderful. And, I'm just thinking, how did we get from, banking and investment to property? What was that journey like?
Yeah, so I joined Investec as a private banker initially. So we provided finance to, in fact, I was in the medical division. So anything from a laptop right through to a hospital, and a lot of the doctors' personal sort of investments. So they would invest in a variety of things, but real estate has always been a key conserver of wealth, right, and a builder over long term. So a lot of the aspects was around real estate, and I've always had a passion for real estate. And then through post studying my CA, I then had to do articles. So at that stage, you could actually do your articles in the corporate. It was, I think, the second year that program, it was called the TOP program, so training outside of public practice, was started. So I then signed up post doing my BCTA. When I was doing my CTA at that time, I was really an article clerk, if you'd like. And that helped me get through the study part pretty quickly. And when I finished and got signed up as a CA, I was already then working as the FD for Growthpoint in the fund context. And that property division was in the investment bank. So it was one area within the investment banking. They had invested some capital in properties, and they would often end up with properties in terms of transactions, etc. So we started building a fund management business, which is really not the bank using its own capital, but the company was listed, Growthpoint. We had third-party shareholders, and we were managing this business for a fee. So ultimately, scaling it was the main objective, because the bigger the amount of assets, the more fees we earned as Investec at the time. And so it gave me a really broad exposure to understanding, because every asset you buy, you have to really understand all the nuts and bolts, every lease, all the dynamics, even the technical side of real estate. You learn pretty quickly when you buy a building and you find out, the electrical substation linked to this building isn't working properly, or the transformers, or whatever the case may be. Then it's going to cost you money. So you make mistakes and you learn along the way. And I obviously was blessed with having some really good mentors along the way that helped guide and direct my thinking around certain issues, and really learn about real estate from scratch, other than from the banking side, which I'd already understood the finance, how to fund these things and how the cash flows worked, etc.
That is so interesting. It's just so beautiful how throughout this journey, every milestone you already had, like the background or like exposure, and somehow this was like a different perspective. So we came from the left, now we're coming from the right. And so it's like just so well-rounded, just in that space of property. And just like that growth point, the point of growth just then started, and I think that's just so amazing. And another thing you mentioned earlier, how you said you've been with Growthpoint, I believe, from 2002, and I'm just thinking that's basically over 2 decades. And
Correct.
that's, guys, UJ turns 20 this year, and that's the same amount of time. And I'm just thinking, throughout this entire journey that you've had at Growthpoint, what are some defining milestones, or it's just career spotlights that built you and sort of capacitated you for this new role that you'll be entering in?
Yeah, so I mean, in that time, it's quite an amazing story. I mean, we started with a little company with literally 15 odd properties worth about 100 million rand, and today the company has assets of 155 billion rand.
Sure.
And it's obviously, as we've mentioned earlier, so it's in retail, office, and industrial. The biggest property asset we have in South Africa is we have a JV with the Government Employees Pension Fund, managed by the PIC, over the Victoria and Alfred waterfront, which is literally the whole precinct there. And then we've made investments into Australia. We control another listed company there called Growthpoint Properties Australia, which we invested into in 2009 in the eye of the global financial crisis. Opportunity opened up for us to invest there, and then subsequently we've invested into the Eastern European market and the UK. And along the way, you are continuously learning about different items, whether it's finance, property, or people, right across those aspects. And I've also been very active as in the industry per se. So I was initially involved in negotiating the property charter for the real estate industry, and from there quite swiftly moved on to negotiating with National Treasury all the terms of the REIT dispensation, which we have in South Africa, which was granted to us in 2013, which is pretty unique to the real estate industry. And then from there, I became SAPOA president in 2013 and 14 for a year. That was a very interesting leadership role that I had to fulfill. And since then, I've been chairing the SA REIT Association, which is the association that looks after all the listed real estate companies that have REIT status. So, I've always been pretty involved in the industry, and then, there always touch points with, broader business that, we probably have to, as business leaders, try and make a difference in our country and try and guide things in the right direction in respect of policy and the right principles that we believe will make our country better and more competitive globally. And we all have that responsibility in business leadership. So those are all aspects that, have kind of added to where I am today. And more recently, I've also been asked by the Minister of Public Works and Infrastructure to chair a committee for him to give him a bit of advice on how to run the government portfolio of properties, as well as their leasing book. So that's quite a big responsibility for all the people that are on the committee with me there. And, ultimately the idea is to create a very buoyant, very strong growing industry and make South Africa competitive, because the real estate industry is one of the little building blocks that makes every organization competitive. So if you think about it, if we're not the most efficient we can be, then the companies occupying our space can't be. And as such, it's a big responsibility. And ultimately, the built environment is like fixed to the ground. It's fixed capital tied to the ground, and it makes a real difference in the economy if you've got a strong growing real estate industry, because it creates jobs. So if we have built a shopping centre, or like we are busy expanding our portfolio as well as the Victoria and Alfred waterfront, those are sustained jobs that you're creating there, and ultimately that does deliver into real revenue for our country.
You mentioned the growing point, and I'm just thinking growth points, growing points. It's just meant to be. And I think another thing that's just so meant to be is just how you guys occupied, like a terrain there in Australia. That just sounds so prophetic, because you were an exchange student there. It's like you saw what was coming, and you just had to believe in yourself and, that desire for property. And now it's literally not just growing and expanding in portfolio, but it's also contributing to the economy. Like the job creation, and as well now the ability, and I guess as well the honor to be on such a high advisory board and just fix and build the country one brick at a time, one job at a time. And that is so exciting. That is so exciting.
No, it is obviously it's a huge responsibility. I mean, that comes with with its pressures. But our expansion into Australia was really at the time, South Africa was going through quite a difficult economic period, and we saw an opportunity to diversify a little bit. And what is quite nice about the real estate industry is that all the earnings that we get from Australia, we actually bring back to South Africa, and we pay it to our shareholders, because these companies are structured as conduits for rental income. So if you are a shareholder in a Growthpoint, you own a little piece of the V&A, you own a little bit piece of Australia, Eastern Europe, plus the South African retail, office, industrial portfolios, and all the income we earn after expenses and after paying our debt gets paid predominantly to all our investors on a 6-monthly basis. So it really is a conduit, and the largest investors in Growthpoint are the pension funds. So if we're working for salaries in our country, you're going to be contributing to a pension fund. Some of that money is going to find its way into Growthpoint, and you will be getting those returns, and they're global returns now from the perspective that you're getting from different parts of the world. You're also earning a bit of income. So it does diversify. South Africa is quite a small economy, in the sort of global context. I think last I looked, somewhere between 24 and 26, depending on the exchange rate. But we've got a very, very developed economy from a financial perspective. I mean, our capital markets and our stock exchange are some of the most sophisticated on the planet. And on the back of that, we've been able to build a very strong business, because it is pretty capital intensive. So big amount of money to buy these assets or develop them, and then you have to just nurture them and you have to maintain them. And even just the maintenance of these assets take a lot of capital. If you don't look after a property, it deteriorates pretty quickly. So ongoing, we continuously managing, the quality of the product that we provide the market.
Interesting. So I'm going to go back to the CEO cap, right? So we know that succession in leadership is really about continuity as well as vision. So as you enter into this new chapter, especially, as group CEO, what are you most excited about? Like in your capacity from a vision or a continuity point, are we changing? Are we pivoting? What excites you the most about the 31st of December? Because then it's Jan.
Yeah, so I take over from the 1st of July next year.
Yeah, actually.
And I've been privileged to work with a friend and a colleague in the form of Norbert Sasser, who's the group CEO currently. So we've worked together for 20 plus years. And it's like the left hand and right hand. We're quite intuitive already. And as fate would have it, he's also alumni of UJ. Wow. So it was a proper UJ team.
Thing.
Absolutely. And what in thinking about taking the reins of a big organization like that is, I'm very excited that we've got a really great management team. So the people around me are really strong people. They have to ultimately, as a collective, we have to grow this business and direct it. We have wonderful culture at Growthpoint. We have strong values and we have really capable, good people, which is really a comfort, but is exciting as well. And then, just given where Growthpoint operates and the influences it has, it is wonderful opportunities that we have ahead. And if you get just any economic growth, in this country, I think we'll perform really, really well as a company and, ultimately developing out South Africa. So the reality is, when looking at it as a leader, you have to try and think forward as to where and how are we going to differentiate ourselves from our competitors? How are we going to meet our clients' requirements in the future? Because they are incredibly dynamic. So if you think about, if you had to market water in a bottle, the requirement actually is reasonably consistent.
Yeah.
If you in a real estate space, even in a shopping center, you continuously assessing who the tenants are in that facility. Do they meet the market requirement? And often the market changes, so the neighborhood changes, the types of people that live there change, the age groups change, all these kind of things. So ultimately meeting their requirements is an ongoing challenge, if you'd like. So that makes real estate pretty dynamic. And when you think about offices, if you look through the COVID period and all the other terrible things that have happened in that environment, apart from a pretty soft economy, the real estate owner has to be on the tips of their toes to deal with some of these issues. And interestingly enough, it's made the company increasingly more innovative. And the one thing that I have learned through some of the learnings over the years is that a company has to continually look to reinvigorate itself, literally to be continuously innovative and re-engineer the way they do things. So if it works, great, but there might be a better way. So the reality is a lot of thinking goes into that, and thinking about the future as to what dynamics and where we're going to be investing, but also at the same time how we operationally going to meet our clients' requirements.
That is so interesting. And another thing I took note of was how UJ coded your jargon was rethinking the future, innovative, the values. And it's just so close to home, because it also just, from black and white, when you just look at by definition what innovation is, and just hearing your journey and your contribution to the country and what you're doing, it's just so wonderful, because you're basically UJ. On
quite.
feet,
Not
with
quite.
hands,
Not
like
quite.
You're doing your part, like you're doing your piece of UJ outside, and it's just so inspiring to witness. And I'm just thinking, as you mentioned, you alluded to, COVID and all the disruptions really, because I think every industry has experienced some sort of disruption from the COVID to now we have the digital transformation and sustainability demands. How are we coping with those things, and even Growthpoint, if you don't mind sharing how, because I've personally heard even some people in property, they're stressed out half the time. They're so stressed out. Everything is so, like you mentioned, it's so complex. Everything changes. Your market changes, possibly even overnight. Things are constantly shifting in the market, and I'm just thinking, in your landscape, how are you guys dealing with this type of a change?
Yeah, I always joke about it a bit. I said, no, we sort of survived the 8 plagues, right? So we started with a really poor economy, then we had COVID, then we had riots, then we had floods in Natal twice, then we had no electricity, then we had no water in Cape Town. And I mean, we thought things were going to go better, right? Then we had interest rates go up by 4.75% in South Africa. They went up by 4% in Australia, and they literally doubled in Eastern Europe. So those are real severe headwinds for any industry. So it's like, typically they would nearly call it a black swan event. And that has had a particularly tough impact on the real estate industry. We were caught in COVID literally as a ham in the sandwich between, on the one side you've got banks and the municipalities who have to be paid, right? Then we've got us, and on this side we've got our clients who didn't want to pay, to be honest, because they're going through such a difficult period, right? So we've managed to navigate through that. It was pretty painful for everybody other than the banks and the and the municipalities, but the reality is that we've got through that. The industry is busy turning for the better, and ultimately we're looking forward. We're always optimistic. Real estate is a long-term investment, and as such, we focus on the future, because that's what we can really, where we're going to make the next big opportunity happen. And that optimism, together with our historic skills and maybe even a little bit of baggage that you've learned along the way, will form your thinking on the way we move forward. But as you've pointed out, the education and the learnings along the way do form a very key basis, and it's ongoing. In this year I've gone back to university. I was at a business school in the US for a period of time, and just to try and get a bit of a reboot, update on some of the latest thinking, some of the newest dynamics. And there's no doubt in my mind that even though the real estate industry has been, impacted in certain ways, it's also a wonderful opportunity for the industry. So I'm very optimistic for the future of not only Growthpoint but also for the industry.
That's exciting. And, just on that note of, growing and the future, and then also looking at education and, of course, the 8 plagues that we've survived, especially here in South Africa, I think one of the plagues we are still suffering and enduring is the challenge of unemployment rates in South Africa. And then, of course, you have your graduates who are still pursuing their postgrad because the anxiety to just leave the academic institutions. Where am I going to go if I leave school? And I'm just thinking, as a leader in business yourself, what type of change do you see, not just Growthpoint, but I think at large, the property industry? How are they creating, spaces and room for opportunity for these graduates to have some sort of security within that sector?
Yeah, so this is a challenge, and it becomes more compounded in an economy that's not growing. So absolutely essential for us to work as a collective to grow this economy, and to guide policy at the national level from a governmental perspective. So for the industry, the biggest association is the South African Properties Owners Association, and they have played quite a pivotal role in creating opportunities, even providing bursaries. And if you go and analyse pretty much most of the large corporates in the property industry, really make an effort providing bursaries. Growthpoint's got a bursary program for not only our own staff, for their children at schools, but also postgrad, and then also for students, to study at various universities in different directions. So it's not just real estate. We broaden it to different directions, because we have a multi-skilled requirement within the business. We also have a grad program, so every year we take in X amount of graduates, and they work there for a year, where they get hands-on experience in different divisions, and it makes them pretty marketable. If they do not get employment, if there's not an opportunity within the company, then there may be outside of the company.
Yeah.
And on top of that, we've got development programs within the organization for young talent to develop. So we've got a Young Sparks program. Those people go through leadership training as well as different aspects to personally develop themselves as future leaders. And, all these kind of little components add to it. Then we've also got programs under our corporate responsibility side of things. And Growthpoint initiated, back in 2003, we initiated a program called the Property Point. And the thinking was very, very simply that, every year we're spending X million rand on maintaining, fixing, buildings, and there's an industry out there that is struggling to access this business opportunity. And you'll find a guy rock up, he sort of knows how to paint, but he doesn't know how to quote, he doesn't know how to do it safely, and there's a whole bunch of things that they need to learn, these businesses, before they can actually work for corporates. And this Property Point is a training program which ultimately trains small corporates of all sorts within the industry, and then gives them an opportunity to get contracts within the industry. And it's become an industry initiative. So, in that industry, I think in that initiative, we've probably created close to 2,500 sustainable jobs just in that space. So that is really teaching people how to fish, and then giving them the ponds, right? So all the real estate companies are become clients for them, and it's been incredibly successful as an enterprise development initiative.
That's wonderful. I'm just thinking, I just heard a whole bunch of UN Sustainable Development Goals in there, just ticking a list in my head. And I'm like, wow, okay, that one. And I think that's just so beautiful, shining a light, not just, globally, where we're making impact, the Australias and the Europes, but also just here back home, and just capacitating our own people so that they can, like you said, fish. Because we've given you the fishing rod, we've given you the pond, and we've capacitated you. I'm not giving you fish, but here's the pond filled with fish,
So, we don't really do it to tick the boxes, to be honest. Those initiatives are done for specific reasons, and there's always a commercial initiative in there, other than, obviously, they do good for the people that are involved and get the opportunities. But if you've got a wide range of suppliers that you can use, it creates a much better economy in the space that you are looking for that service. So ultimately, we want businesses to be able to service us at the level that we need, and we need them to be competitive. And that's the same for our country. We need to trade at the level that we need to be able to compete internationally, and to do that, everybody has to do the best they can.
That's wonderful. And, I just actually want to find out from you. So we mentioned this going back to school thing, because life is a journey. And like Mandela said, you never really stop learning, right? And we want to know, how are you still so motivated? Do you have any, habits that possibly the viewers on the other side of the screen can also, okay, I'm going to try this out because this is not working for me, and I want to be this highly motivated and possibly see myself in the shoes of a CEO one day, and just doing the best that I can, not just for myself, but uplifting my country as well, and global impact. Any cool hidden talents and tricks of the trade that you'd like to share, so we can also try them out and possibly be CEOs.
Yeah, look, I don't know what the secret sauce is. A bit of it is having an 18-year-old brain stuck in a 56-year-old body, which is, ultimately, I'm a pretty inquisitive person by my very nature, and I really enjoy people. So, those things help in keeping you learning along the way. In terms of, being open to study further, after doing my CA, I must admit that was it was a really tough experience, doing it part-time and having to do the board exams and all those kind of things. So for a little period, I had to focus on my career after that. And then I did get an opportunity to be able to spend some time and go to a global business school, which just gave us a few different perspectives. And, the thinking would be that we obviously operate in our little bubble in South Africa. If you open up to these business schools, you're not the only foreigner there. I was in a class with 167 other people from 45 different countries, as wide as Mongolia through to the US, and so very broad, and also different industries, right? So the key to the source there is you build a really wide network. You are learning from your peers in that group, and the other thing is that you get different perspectives on things. You might learn something about your industry that you didn't know from somebody from the outside, or something about their industry which can help us service their requirements so much better. So when thinking about being sustainable in being a sustainable leader, I think that it's important to remain really grounded, to understand that it's just a role, right? And you've been given the privilege to be able to make a difference and guide a business, but it doesn't change you as an individual necessarily. And I've always strongly believed that you need to be physically sustainable as well. So I've always played a lot of sport. It helps me deal with huge amounts of pressure, and keeps me fit and healthy to some extent anyway. God bless. And the reality is that I think also having a very stable, blessed family life is very important, and understanding the community that you're in and that you serve and that you're making a contribution in. So all those little aspects of your life have to sort of be in balance, because if one goes totally out of balance, it has an impact on everything else. So if your family environment's a mess, then it spills over into your work environment, and it takes your focus away. And if you want to be a successful person in business, you need to be very determined, you need to be persistent, you need to be hungry, and you need to understand that you have to be sustainable in the way you do things. Because if you do things on a short-term basis, some people might get away with it in the short term, but over the long term, and if you're in a game like ours, I mean, we're a long-term industry, right? So looking at long-term sort of time frames, and so our decisions we make now, they play out over the next 20 years. So it's important to take all those things into account. And often, the next big success is in fact the failure that you've just had, and the learning that you get from that. So I think South Africans tend to look at failure with quite a negative bias. Whereas I think there's a school of thought that you should really, if you've made a mistake, then that's learning, right? That's learning. It's the next step. It's the next step to success. And if you're not, and often people are so scared of making errors, and you find that with people coming through the ranks, they always want to look good. They never want to be seen to have made a mistake. Just means they're not doing enough, right? So you have to take risk to make money, and you have to manage it as best as you can. So you try and mitigate as many risks as you can. But ultimately, we all make mistakes in trying to be successful, and it's just how you manage that and your mindset. So attitude is absolutely key.
100%. And I just want to go back to this 18-year-old brain, right? And especially because we also have young people on the other side of the screen. And if you could possibly, and this is especially because you're in an industry that's long-term, like you mentioned, and I'm sure you're aware, the fast-paced economy we lived in now, our youth of today want everything now. I want to be successful now. I need to make it now, and I can't fail. So I'm just asking for the 18-year-old self. So if you could give yourself, your 18-year-old self advice, and this advice would also go to, the young viewers on the other side of the screen, what would you say to that 18-year-old self, especially because the pressure now is possibly worse and we want to hear, we're from the future. Tell the past.
Yeah, so sort of back to the future,
Yeah. Like a
look
blast
back
to the
to
past
back in the
thing.
day, right?
Yes.
Yeah, look, I think by very nature, I was a very impatient person as well. So yeah, you're so bad I can't even sit and fish, because why would you not sit there so long and wait for this
Yeah.
fish to bite? So I'm rather the guy who'll dive in and go and catch the fish type of
Yeah.
thing, right? So my nature is for action, and by that, it's sort of wired into you that there has to be progression all the time, right?
Yes.
And I think what I have become more comfortable with is that everything happens for a reason in life, all right? You might not like what happens at the time,
Yeah.
but if you've got the right attitude and the learning from that, it is that next stepping stone to the next thing. And it's really looking for the opportunity in that. So when you start your career, often people will come in and nearly demand this and that. Instead of saying, okay, well, let's make the best of what I've got here and have the right attitude to say, okay, well, I can do this. Give me more. Give me more. And by doing that, you're learning, and also working closely with people that that can really act as mentors in your development going forward. So, when I started working, if a guy said to me, "Listen, go make the photostat," great, I was off. I made the photostat. I was back,
Yeah.
right? And I always I didn't really have a attitude to say I was entitled to anything. Doesn't mean I let people walk all over me, but it did mean that that from a attitudinal perspective, I was always open to learning and to doing something new. So because of that, people often would give me opportunities, really, right? And as I said, this thing is a stepping stone. So even if people make mistakes, if they're doing it for the right reasons, there's always learning in that.
Yeah.
And not just for the people making the mistake, but for the people around them. So one of the key tips is to, when you think about, is to see what other people are doing and what works and what doesn't. So learning from other people's mistakes,
Observance.
that's always the cheapest one. Okay. and then clearly to focus on opportunity and have that attitude to say, listen, I'm open to trying something extra, doing something new. And those little opportunities, you'll be surprised how often they develop. So it was the strangest thing for all the period. I never really got a promotion until now, because all the jobs that I got was opportunities that we sort of worked on as a collective, and it led to. So if that makes sense. So you sort of led to. I mean, if you want to be a CEO of a business today, and it's non-negotiable, great, be one. Go and start your own business, right? And then you will be a CEO of a business, and you can then determine what the direction, strategy, and actions are of that business. But ultimately, you have to understand, you have to take a bit of risk to make money, and you have to create value to make some kind of money in the scheme of things. And it's not always just about money, to be honest. That's I think initially, and I mean, I'll put my hand up to that, I went into it for the money, right? I wanted to make money. I wanted to be in big business because I wanted to make money. But since then, I think your priorities change as you get a little bit older. And now it's more about what we can create for the future, for this country, and the other jurisdictions that we operate in, and also what we can transfer to the new generation of leaders that come through in our country to lead, be it real estate or any other industry for that matter.
That is so beautiful. And, I just want to give a remark. So this is to the 18-year-old you. I'm from the future and you've made it. Everything is going to be all right. And that is also to anybody watching as well. Because I think we're so hard on ourselves and we're always overthinking our decisions, and sometimes you just need to be open to trying new things and taking marketing with industrial psychology and accountancy and going into banking and just
Exactly.
going everywhere. And maybe this is a sign to become an exchange student. You never know, and that was just so beautiful. And I think in closing, if you'd like to share anything with our viewers that you'd like for them to take home and what you want them to remember you for.
That's a very difficult question, to be honest.
The hot seat.
The reality is that the reason why I do what I do and why I'm so privileged to be with really good people is because the environment that we have created that can actually make a difference, and the built environment's quite unique. We touch people's lives every day.
Sure.
When you go shopping, or even if you're getting a delivery, it's coming through probably one of our facilities, right?
Yo.
And then if you're a tourist and you have a wonderful memory created at the Victoria and Alfred waterfront, I mean, these are all physical delivery points of the services that we provide as an industry. So ultimately, when I move on in life, if there is a business that has made a contribution to people's lives and made them better, then I'd be very, very comfortable with that in taking on the next opportunity, because I don't think I'm the kind of guy that will ever be able to sit still.
That is exciting. And thank you so much, for just joining us today and just sharing this wonderful and really inspiring journey all the way from the orange soil. It is so inspiring. Myself, I'm inspired. I might just go back into property. Who knows? It is extremely wonderful. And thank you so much for sharing with us. And I just want to say, you guys, this is the next group CEO for Growthpoint Properties, the one and only Estienne de Klerk. Thank you so much for joining
Thanks,
us.
Palesa. Appreciate it. It's been fun.
Of course. And again, it is me, Palesa Ramafola, your host. And thank you so much for tuning into another episode of In Conversation with UJourneys.